If it serves my highest good, then it will be mine. If it serves my highest good, then it will be mine. If it serves my highest good, then it will be mine. Yeah. And Katie for following all of that. Thanks, Nick.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to move a little more to the center here. You know, always returning to center. Never, you know. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's great to see all of you, and happy Father's Day to all of you fathers, and happy Father's Day to all of you who have fathers, and a reminder that we all have one father and one mother, and we're here to celebrate that and to celebrate the experience of fatherhood. I came across a story of a man who talked about his 16-year-old brother when they were younger, ran out to kind of late. He was out late with friends one night, and suddenly he realized that it was Father's Day the next day. And so he had neglected to get anything for his father, get a card for him or his dad. So after a lot of searching, he came to an all-night store and was able to kind of look around, but was really disappointed because there was only 2 cards left on Father's Day cards left on the shelves. And so he went ahead and bought one of them and brought it home and kind of sheepishly gave it to his dad. And he said, Dad opened it and said, "You've been like a father to me." And the dad kind of looked at him kind of quizzically and says, "Well, Dad, it was either that or the one that said, 'Now that I'm a father too.'" So he decided on the former one, obviously. So I came across something from Brad Pitt. And Brad Pitt was in an interview with NBC a few years back, and back when he was like 42 years old, and he says, "Man, I've got kids now. I'm 42 years old," the actor, and he said, "Man, it completely changes your perspective and your perceptions of things. Certainly takes your focus off of you." And he said that was okay because I was kind of getting sick of me. And so he goes on to say, "And I'll tell you something, if I can get a burp out of that little thing, I feel so much accomplishment." Well, happy Father's Day to you all, and thank you for those of you who are fathers, and thank you for just being here in that awareness of the power and the beauty of what fathers are and can be in our lives. We are in a series of lessons, and I really thought it was actually still very appropriate to have this lesson today on Father's Day, because the lesson in our book, we're working with a powerful, wonderful classic work by Eric Butterworth, one of the most well-respected Unity teachers, and it's called The Concentric Perspective, What's in It from Me? And we've been talking about this understanding of what is a concentric perspective. And a concentric perspective really is an understanding that we are and we live circles within circles. Concentric really does mean that we're living from these circles, but we're living from the inner circles to the outer circles. We have a tendency to really live life in the opposite way. We have a tendency to live life from the outer circles or the circumference of life, rather than living it from that place within us and allowing that inner circle to expand outward into our life and world. And concentrics is really a practice and an art of really tuning ourselves back into an understanding that life is really formed and shaped and created and is really coming into place and into our experience from our inner world into our outer world. And so we are tuned into an understanding that we are participating in a creative process, that we're always participating in it, and we're doing that whether we're doing it consciously or whether we're doing it unconsciously. And our lesson this week is really about a couple of things. One is the faculty of will and what we do with that and how we use it. And the other lesson is about the ability and the art of how to not just give from life, but to receive as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about this understanding about will. And Eric really gives us some really profound things to consider. We've been taught oftentimes that to be successful in life and to have life conditions to be successful, he says most conditioning courses emphasize the need to develop a strong will. And they stress that much failure in life is due to a weak will. And people who do not have the will and determination to know what they want and to go after it rarely succeed. And I think that's a pretty important understanding in many ways. We do need to have a will, and we need to have a will that is really connected to what it is that we truly wish to experience and desire in our lives. However, one of the things that he really emphasizes is that it's not this idea, and he talks about one success course, is that a way that we are to use our will is to smash through the wall that blocks our path by the projection of our will. So we're not here to try and, in a real sense, there's this kind of idea, this thinking in consciousness that says we have to make it happen. And I know it's easy to get caught up in that. It's easy to get caught up in this idea that we're the ones that have to make it happen. I remember a friend of mine had a saying some time ago, and I think there's some truth in it, but there's a trap in it also. And one of the things he used to put on his signature is, if it is to be, it's up to me. You heard that saying before? And interestingly enough, there's some truth to that, and there's some falsehood to that, if you think about it. And the truth to it is, if it is to be, it is up to us in that we have to make the choice for it. And the other side of it is, if it is to be, it's not up to us because we're not the one that can do it. Make sense? When I say the we I'm talking about is the little we. The we that is our ego voice, our intellect, our limited way of looking at and seeing and perceiving life in the world. And so part of what learning in the concentric perspective is to really begin to recognize that there is something actually that can and will work through us in a way that allows a greater experience of good, of blessings, of our divine nature to pour into our lives. And part of the concentric perspective is learning how to shift out of this understanding that it's up to me. And at the same time, having the understanding that it's up to me. It seems like a dichotomy. It seems like it is what's the word I'm looking for? It seems like it's two completely opposing thoughts and ideas, but the reality is it's simply a subtle understanding of the I that we're talking about. And the I that we're talking about is not the little I, but it is the I am. And if we can tune into that understanding, there's a power that works greater in us and through us. And Eric goes on to say the will is an important driving force in our lives, and to progress in life, we must develop a sense of determination and persistence and the ability to keep on keeping on when things seem to stand against us. And this is very important, but the will needs to mature into a willingness, a conscious process of letting go. And so the creative process that works in and through us is really more of a process of not so much trying to make something happen as it is to allow something to happen. I think about the Abraham Hicks work, and there's a wonderful lesson I was listening to recently as I was driving to the Unity Conference. We had a wonderful conference this last week, and this Unity people gathering from all over the world, really to lift the energy of and awareness of the divine beings that we all are. Not just in ourselves, not just in the Unity ministers and the Unity leaders, but really our focus is really raising the energy and the consciousness of the world through our own work. And we don't do that by making something out there happen, but by making a change and a shift in our consciousness and our energy and our awareness within ourselves. had some beautiful experiences and lessons with that this week. And so one of the things that about that is that it's not just making the change internally, but then practicing and living life from that space and listening to the guidance that we get in ways that we can shift and can share more of the divine light out in our experiences in our world. And so part of that is to tune into our willingness. He says that otherwise the will tends to become willfulness, stubbornness, battering down doors to achieve a personal goal. In other words, there must be an awareness of that work which works in us and his willingness to let it unfold. In Philippians, Paul says, "For God is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good and pleasure." And so this statement really is helping us to, well, sometimes people get confused. We sometimes get confused in this idea of what is God's will. And I know that many traditional religious people have a tendency to sometimes think and teach this idea that when someone is suffering, that that's God's will. You ever heard that idea before? Oh, well, it's God's will. And when something we don't like happens, well, it's God's will. I remember growing up, my parents used to talk about a couple that they used to be friends with, and a very, very religious couple. And the wife and the husband would come over sometimes, and any time that the husband would say or do something that, that the wife didn't think was appropriate or didn't like, she'd say, "Well, George, that's not God's will." Or if it's something she really liked and thought it was wonderful, she'd say, "Oh, it's God's will." And we have a tendency to buy into this belief system that says, if we like it, it's God's will. And if we don't like it, it's God's will. Right? Or just the opposite, perhaps. If we don't like it, then it's not God's will, obviously. So part of what Eric is trying to show us and teach us is there is an energy and a consciousness within us that allows the creative process and the flow to work within us in such a way that it is allowing something greater than our own intellectual concepts to come into being in such a way that there is always a blessing. You see, what this really involves is simply choice. When I think about the idea and the understanding of will, the faculty of our will is our ability to choose. You might say, in some ways, it's really that simple. It's that simple. But the reality is that choice is something that we need to do continually over and over and over again. And we have a tendency to get a little bit lazy with our choices, don't we? We get a little bit lazy and we tend to think that, well, we're just going to let things go and flow. But part of what having a willingness is to choose over and over again to allow something more. Because it's so easy to get caught up in the trap of thinking my way or the highway. Ever heard that term before? We live from that place a lot of times, don't we? If it doesn't turn out the way that I think it's supposed to be, then I'm not going to be happy about it. Right? And if I'm not going to be happy about it, then obviously it's not God's will. So, part of what our concentric perspective is to learn that we are creating life experiences from the within and to the without. And we do that primarily through our will, through the choices that we're making in life. So he talks about there's an erroneous concept that God has a mind in many ways that is separate than yours and mine. And that out of some capricious intent, God may will something contradictory to our own desires and our hearts. It's important to wake up to a realization that the will of God could never intend for us anything other than that which is the highest and the best. Let me say that again because I think it's such an important, valuable understanding. The will of God cannot intend anything for us. Ultimately, let me say it this way. God cannot will for us anything other than Him, herself. And if you have a belief system that God is something other than divine good and benevolence, then you're going to believe that somehow that God is going to want something for you that maybe is not good. And so part of our shifting from a concentric perspective is to recognize that there really is only one presence and one power in this universe, in this place, and in our lives, God, the absolute good. It's our first unity principle. There's only one principle. There's only one power. There's only one presence. And that presence and power is ultimately benevolent, is good. And if we can tune into that understanding and awareness and really begin to make choices to allow things to flow from that perspective, we become a part of creating more of that awareness and that understanding and that connection with that energy in our lives. And we allow something powerful to move through us in ways that we probably hadn't really planned out or mapped out at times. Sometimes we make plans and they're great and they're good. And sometimes, I love that saying, how to make God laugh, right? Tell God your plans. Sometimes we plan things and we think the world is a certain way, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And if it's not that way, then we get stuck into believing that it's not good. And yet we don't really have a larger vision to be able to understand that perhaps, even in those times and circumstances that things don't feel right or feel positive or sometimes they feel hurtful, that ultimately if we can shift our voice and our energy and our attention back into an understanding of that absolute good and align ourselves with that, it's amazing how things unfold. Now, it doesn't happen immediately. It doesn't happen instantly, just like our song said, in time, something really does unfold in such a way that we will see and experience more of the blessings of the light and of peace and of power in our world. And so our work in working with the concentric perspective is tune into an energy of allowing. One of the things that came to me as I was really preparing and meditating and reflecting on my lesson is that one of the ways that we somehow get caught up in blocking our own good in life is by getting really attached to how that good is supposed to show up. I'm reminded of a story, it's a very well-known unity story, and not just unity, I think it's probably been shared around the world, but there's a man who, there was a flood happening, and he went up on the roof of his house and was up there and was praying, "Dear God, please deliver me from this flood." And so a little bit, the water's rising up, and he's getting more and more, a little more nervous and anxious, and the boat comes by and says, "Oh, come on in." He says, "Oh, no, it's okay. God's going to take care of it." A little bit later, he's praying, "But God, dear God, please, please." And another boat comes by and says, "Come on, get in. We're going to, No, it's okay. God's got it." And then a little bit later, a helicopter comes by and they drop a ladder down and he says, "Oh, come on up." No, don't worry about it. God's got it. God's taking care of me. Man drowns, winds up going to heaven, talking to God. He says, "Man, I really knew that you had it. I mean, what was going on?" He said, "What are you talking about? I just sent 3 boats on a helicopter." Old story, been around a while, but how often do we do that? How often do we find ourselves thinking about how life is supposed to be and not really being open to the blessings that are already there available to us? And that gets me into a second part of our lesson, which is this idea of the art of receiving. Eric gives an interesting example here. He says, oftentimes in life when people who are unaware live purely from a horizontal experience in life. And he gives an analogy of a water strider skittering across the top of a pond. Can you see those? You remember those little bugs that kind of just skitter across the top of the pond? He says, in this consciousness, life is purely a matter of what happens around to an individual. But when the truth dawns in consciousness, individuals become aware that they are spiritual beings with a vertical dimension of experience, a vertical dimension. And so we're not living just from the circumference of life, we're really living from a deeper and perhaps even a higher energy and awareness and consciousness. And coming from that place, we begin to see that life is lived from within outward. And so it seems obvious that behind every act of giving, there must be a willingness to receive. Well, that does seem obvious to me, doesn't it to you? And yet sometimes we live in a place where we think that ours is only to be in the place of giving. We are to live in a giving consciousness, and part of that giving consciousness has to do with not only giving to, but giving from. And being conscious of what we're giving from, and also being conscious of what we're giving to. I came across a song some years ago, and I don't remember where I got this song. And it spoke to me, though, and it's spoken to me different times when I've come through different experiences in life. And it goes kind of like this. God's will for you is perfect happiness, perfect happiness, perfect happiness. God's will for you is perfect happiness, perfect happiness, perfect happiness. He just wants you to receive His eternal gift of love. I believe it's from A Course in Miracles. There is an outpouring of amazing energy and blessing and light and life and love and health that is continually right now trying to pour itself out in and through each and every one of us in our lives and world. Eric gives an example of this as Niagara Falls. Think about Niagara Falls. Think about the Niagara River. How many of you have been to Niagara Falls? It is absolutely, stunningly, powerfully, overwhelmingly amazing, in my opinion. And at Niagara Falls, he says, it drops over the falls. And he says, at Niagara, though the energy is limitless, we can only have as much energy as we accept through the great turbines. Note carefully that the great generators that harness the power of Niagara Falls are not creating electricity. They are the technological means through which we have learned how to receive the energy that is already there. Can you get an image of that? You see, the power that flows through Niagara Falls is already there. It's already available to us, and it is always flowing, and it is always available to us, but we have to be in a situation, a perspective, a consciousness to be able to receive that energy and that power and allow it to be transmuted and transformed in the power and energy that we call electricity in our lives, or blessings, or good, or prosperity, or even for that matter, health. And the important thing to remember about this is that in that understanding is to get an understanding that it already exists. It's already there. And if we can tune our consciousness in such a way that we can recognize that that which we are seeking is also seeking us. Emily Cady talks about this. The good that you are seeking is already exists basically. And it's God knocking at the door of our consciousness, trying to pour out a blessing through us. And so if you think about any good desire that you might have in your life, whatever that might be, part of the practice of concentrics is learning how to tune into the experience and the knowing that whatever it is that you feel that you would like to experience more of in your life, the practice is learning how to tune into already knowing that it exists for you, and it already is real, and it already is there for you in a form and a way that is just right and perfect. It may not take the same form that you've imagined it in your mind, but that doesn't mean that that it isn't there, or it doesn't mean that it doesn't flow. And what we have a tendency to do is to believe that because I can't see it with my eyes, or feel it with my touch, or hear it with my ears, or even that, for that matter, sometimes I can't feel it in my heart that it doesn't exist. And that's a false belief. Because we're never given a desire without having that which is available to us to bring that desire into our being and into our manifestation. Charles Fillmore says it this way in Prosperity. The spiritual substance from which comes all visible wealth is never depleted. It is right within you all the time and responds to your faith in it and your demands on it. It is not affected by our ignorant talk of hard times, though we are affected because our thoughts and words govern our demonstration. The unfailing resource is always ready to give. It has no choice in the matter. It must give, for that is its nature. Pour your living words of faith into the omnipresent substance, and you will be prospered, though all the banks in the world close their doors. Turn the great energy of your thinking toward plenty ideas, and you will have plenty, regardless of what men about you are saying or doing. I love this passage. I love this passage because it really does speak to an understanding that we are always in an awareness of the possibility of greater good in our lives. And our work is really to tune ourselves into it, to tune ourselves into that knowing that not only are we in a universe that is always trying to pour out a blessing through us, but we're part of participating in that. And the only thing that can block that flow is our choosing in some way to feel like we're not in that flow. Our choosing in some way that we believe a belief system that holds that we don't have abundance, that we don't have what we want. And so Jesus put it this way, ask and you shall receive. Knock and the door is open. Ask and you shall receive. Knock and the door is open. And the thing to be aware of is whatever we ask for is what we are going to receive. In fact, we're doing it right now. And the door that will open is the one that we knock on. And so if we're knocking on a door of I don't have, the universe is so loving and so gracious that it'll give us more of I don't have. You follow what I'm saying? And so part of our work of receiving is getting into an energy and a consciousness of having. Getting in an energy, a consciousness that it already is true. It already is so. Now, our affirming something doesn't make it so. Do you realize that? We can affirm something over and over again. I can say, I'm a purple pony, I'm a purple pony, I'm a purple pony, I'm a purple pony, over and over and over again. And if enough of us believe that, you will see me as a purple pony, I can tell you. But that doesn't make it the truth of me. You follow what I'm talking about? But what happens when we affirm the truth, we align ourselves with it. And as we accept it and receive it as truth, it becomes the energy and the consciousness of truth for us. And we align ourselves with that truth, and it manifests through us in whatever ways and form are the highest and best for us to receive and to experience it. I love this story. There was actually a commercial that was given some years ago during a Super Bowl, and it was a FedEx commercial. Some of you guys may remember this commercial. And it was a spoof on that movie Castaway. And Tom Hanks, of course, played in Castaway, but had a FedEx worker whose plane went down on a deserted island and was there for 5 years. And through the whole movie, he's kept on this. He had all these packages, and he opened a whole bunch of them and used different things in them. Didn't really find a lot that was really that useful, but he had one package that he decided he was just going to hold on to that one and make sure he delivered that particular package. And so you see this guy's dragging up to the door of this house, and he knocks on the door, and the lady comes to the door, and he says, I've been on a desert island for 5 years, and I've been holding this package to make sure I could deliver it to you. And so he hands it to her, and she said, well, thank you very much. And she starts going, and he says, ma'am, could I ask you, I'm just curious, what was in that package? And she said, well, let's open and look. And she said, oh, not a whole lot. It's just the simple things, just it's a GPS and there's a satellite phone. Oh, and a compass. Wow. And oh, look at this. There's some seeds here. And the package is already available to us, but our work is to open the package, right? The blessings are already available to us. Our work is to tune into them and to open the package. And then also one of the things that Eric talks about is we don't want to get into this idea of prayer being some kind of a struggle, that somehow that we have to really, if we pray harder, somehow it's going to make things happen more effectively. The truth of the matter is that's probably one of the things that's getting in the way of our experiencing the blessings. This idea of praying harder is really erroneous. I see a lot of times people talking about on Facebook, the prayer warriors. That kind of really, to me, that doesn't make sense to me at all. I just don't get this whole idea of trying to fight for what you're trying to receive and experience in life. It's not about the fighting. One of my favorite poems that's been a real blessing for me over the years is by Lowell Fillmore, the grandson of Charles Fillmore. Or the son of, I'm getting confused, and I think it's the son of Charles Fillmore. The name of the prayer is called The Answer. When for a purpose I had prayed and prayed and prayed, until my words seemed worn and bare with arduous use, and I had knocked and asked again, and all my fervor and persistence brought no hope, I paused to give my weary brain a rest, and ceased my anxious human cry. In that still moment, after self had tried and failed, there came a glorious vision of God's power. And lo, my prayer was answered in that hour. And so part of the understanding of concentrics is to recognize that we are all here in a giving process. And a part of that giving process is allowing ourselves not only to be a part of the giving in life, but also to be a part of the receiving in life. Not trying to make it happen, but trying to be the light of the world, as Jesus called us. You are the light of the world. And part of you unfolding in that light is simply allowing yourself to accept that in yourself, for yourself, about yourself. One of my ministerial friends that I went to ministerial school with came across this prayer, and I don't remember where she got it, but it's kind of rippled throughout my life and through Unity in many ways. And the prayer was this: I let God be God in me. I let God be God in me. And in my meditation this last week, I got, not only do I let God be God in me, but our work is also to let God be God through me. And so it's a receiving of the awareness of our unique divine nature that is in the very heart of each and every one of us. And it's allowing ourselves to allow that Spirit to flow in such a way that we are not only allowing God to be God in us, in our experience in our lives, but to allow that Spirit to work through us, to send forth even more blessings out into our world. So there's our lesson for this week and probably the rest of our lives. Something to get warmed up on. So let's move into our meditation time. So let's move into a comfortable place in our physical being, in our chair, moving into a place within our thoughts, openness, of peace. We know it's in a place of peace that we're most open and receptive to the presence of Spirit, of the divine. So we breathe in, allowing that breath to flow inward and allowing it to flow outward. And we choose. We use the power to let our hearts and minds be open, receptive. Open and receptive to the amazing flow of divine light and love that's always present and available, working in and through us. We're willing to put aside any fears and limiting beliefs, any past experiences, any negative emotions, anything that would block or stand in the way of that divine flow. And trust and know that there's a power greater than our limited self that is always pouring in and through us to bring about a greater good, not only in our lives, but in the lives of those around us. And that as we allow that flow to pour out, we allow it to come in, we are a part of a unique divine blessing that is ours to share and to receive. And in the very act of allowing that flow, our lives become fuller and richer, deeper, and more beautiful. I breathe in the light, and I breathe out the light. I breathe in life, and life breathes out through me. I breathe in love and allow myself to be the channel of love. I give thanks that there is one source of my good, and I choose to be an instrument of that good in my own life, in my loved ones, in my world. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Blessed Spirit. And so it is. And so it is. Thank you, God. Take a nice deep breath now. Let your awareness come back into this room, this time, this place, giving thanks that you are right now in the flow of divine good. And so it is.